all the things that were put into place circa right at about a year ago are still having ramifications on our culture that go well beyond the 9/11 DIVOC itself. We have had so many things implemented and pushed on us, from wearing masks to staying at home to socially distance, and now the jab in the arm thing. All of these things, and businesses closing, churches closing, those things don't come without some kind of consequence. And the consequences are what I'm going to talk about here today. I have a lot of data to share with you. I printed out quite a few little research papers of all the negative effects that have happened as a direct result of not 9/11 DIVOC itself, but our response to it. And oh yeah, by the way, if you're new to my code, 9/11 DIVOC, just do that backwards. What's that spell? Okay, now you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I can get past the censors saying 9/11 DIVOC, and sometimes they crack the code. So I'm going to hope they don't crack this code. But honestly, like, we have so much collateral damage that has been done. Unintended consequences from the response, from the lockdowns to all the things that have been put into place. And I want to talk about some of those things today. And I definitely want to hear your comments about these things I'm going to share about. But we have a $15 trillion 9/11 DIVOC question to answer. Approximately $5 trillion in the USA and $15 trillion around the world has been lost, not to 9/11 DIVOC, but to our response to it. Billions of human lives have been negatively affected around the world by the lockdowns, the loss of income, loss of business in many sectors, massive increased poverty, health effects from 9/11 DIVOC and other newly neglected diseases, things like heart health, cancer, other screenings have all been missed, medical care not available to people that are used to having it available. Never before has the entire world responded to a threat of a virus and the subsequent disease and death from it in this manner before. Like, literally, we've had other coronaviruses out there. The swine flu, most famously, right at about a decade ago. And I don't remember us locking down. Barack Obama was our president at the time. I don't remember us locking down. I don't remember us having to stay at home and socially distance and wear a mask. Do you guys remember that? Those of you of a certain age that remember that? No, I don't either. And why? Like, what makes this one, 9/11 DIVOC, so different from MERS and other coronaviruses that we've dealt with? The virus didn't choose for us. It was our choice. In February, March, and April, and even May of last year, it was understandable for the common response from the leaders to be, we don't really know much about 9/11 DIVOC, so we're taking the necessary precautions. And I think all of us at the beginning of this, no matter what they told us, it was so new, we were willing to accept. And so that's why we all kind of went along with this at first. But now here we are all these months later, and for the most part, the world is still being told the same thing. We don't know how to stop this or control it. Well, I think part of the challenge is early on, we were not really having a whole lot of statistics. Well, now we have a whole lot more statistics, and we know how this thing behaves, and we know the percentage of people that are getting this who are actually dying from it. And it's minuscule compared to what it is that all the things that are put into place. Like, I have been doing a lot of thinking about what would happen if we truly had a virus that was killing, say, 15% of the population. That's a significant number of people, killing 15%. I think there would be a lot more people willing to buy into all of the measures that we're going through. But we're talking about a 0.003% death rate. That is so minuscule, it's not even funny. And we could bring in things that kill people at a lot higher rate than that. If you count the 700,000 people a year that die of heart disease, or the 400,000 people a year that die of type 2 diabetes, we have much bigger killers amongst the chronic diseases that people deal with than this 9/11 DIVOC. And yet this is the thing that has everybody on lockdown. They need to be locking down the junk food aisle at the grocery store if they don't want to lock something down, right? Worse yet, the necessary testing has either not been done to either evaluate whether the social distancing is working and what distance is best. They told us 6 feet from the start. Where did they pull that out of? Their butt? Because there was never any science that said that 6 feet you're safe from getting the virus, but 5 feet, oh boy, you're about to get it. It's going to knock you upside the head. No, they've never done anything like that looked at that. Also, whether masks are safe, N95 versus cloth versus other. They just told us put anything over our mouth. Like literally anything just to cover our mouth. That's what they said. Did they ever do any randomized controlled trial or any kind of study that looked at that? There have been some studies that show, yeah, the particles still get through. So why are we wearing a mask? Particles can get through from your mouth or enter from someone else. How effective they are at limiting the spread of 9-1 DIVOC. The science is not settled on this, and there has yet to be any kind of published data of valid testing from multiple sources that will corroborate this. There was a Dutch study of about 6,000 people that showed no benefit from wearing a mask. We also don't know, nobody's ever identified this virus in a lab. Did you know that SARS-CoV-2 has never been isolated in a lab and they can see it for themselves? So what are they testing when they are using the PCR test? What are they testing? It's not 9-1 DIVOC. They're just testing any coronavirus, and then they amplify that. And so all of this stuff that's been put into place to supposedly keep us safe is all based on a test that is pretty dubious, whether it's actually testing for the very thing that we think it is. How exactly in great detail it enters your body and goes through replication in there. We also don't know whether lockdowns work and what parameters make an effective or ineffective lockdown. Most of the experts that I have been researching and looking at say that the negative effects of the lockdown are far, far worse than the potential negative effects of not locking down. So you've got California. Gavin Newsom has basically had California in a lockdown forever. And those poor people out there, they can't go anywhere. It's disgusting. It's basically a little prison. They also don't know which antivirals work, if any. So we have like existing therapeutics and medications that could be used against this, but they don't know which ones are used. They're also not promoting those. And in some cases, they've actually been blocking known therapeutics that could be helpful. Earlier in the year, when a doctor wanted to maybe try to use hydroxychloroquine with their patient, they were not allowed to prescribe that because they blocked it from being prescribed. We don't know which of the V words work, a little jab in the arm, but they don't know which ones work. We do know that there are people actually getting damaged by this. There's a video that went viral just yesterday where a woman was like shaking the whole time she was standing up. And all that had happened was she got the V word jabbed into her arm. And there's been some more deaths of medical professionals. You're not hearing about this on the news. And so another collateral damage from our response to 9-1 DIVOC. We don't know what numbers, what percentage will be necessary for herd immunity. We've heard Dr. Fauci say as high as 90% now. Earlier in the summer last year, he was like, 65, 70. Now it's 90. So it's like, we don't know what's necessary. The definition has been changed actually at the World Health Organization of what herd immunity is. And it also excludes natural infection and only claims that the V word percentage is what matters. Now that one doesn't make any sense to me at all. Why would we not also include people who are naturally infected? And whether or not we have yet. So these are all the questions that are out there about kind of what we've been doing in response. So if you're just joining us, We are looking at the collateral damage that has come from our response to 9/1 DIVOC. So there's trillions of dollars at stake here. And one would think that each and every assumption that contributed to the problem and our response to it would be questioned, broken down, intensely scrutinized, tested, validated, and shared. Well, part of that is now we have a censorship issue. If you speak out against the things that have been done, you're now being silenced. You're now not being allowed to have this conversation, have this debate, have this tit for tat back and forth about the good and the bad and the ugly of all these things we've had done. And this is why this collateral damage is probably worse than it could be, because nobody is able to challenge the mainstream narrative. If proper scrutiny has happened, where's the evidence? Adding to the problem is the apparent censorship of various potential therapies, whether they're effective or not, squashing and retraction of scientific papers, social media bans of dangerous misinformation, which, by the way, there is no such thing as misinformation. There's information, and information informs. That's what it does. I'm going to write a post about this soon, but information informs. It could be bad information, but it still informs. And if it's bad information, let it get out there in the zeitgeist, and then let the truth challenge what's in there, and that will make itself evident if it's whether it's good or bad information. There is no such thing of this nonsense of misinformation. Mainstream media blackout of a lot of stories that cover all this, and various pundits that declare that we're in the midst of a great reset, a new normal, a need to build back better. And they say that's the only way forward. So let's get into some of these consequences, because I've been looking at this for a little while, and so many of the things that they have done to us over the past year have had some dire consequences. And you know people in your life who've had been subjected to not being able to go see their grandma, because grandma's in a nursing home and they won't let you close. And I've seen some very heartbreaking visuals of grandkids going to see their grandma through the window, and they'll pull grandma up there and let her sit there for like 10-15 minutes. You can see her just sad and crying, and the kids want to say hi to grandma and they can't hug her, can't touch her. That has an effect. And we're going to get into some of those kind of things here today. But this first one is from the Toronto Sun in Canada. Canadian experts' research finds lockdown harms are 10 times greater than the benefits they're supposed to do. And so lockdowns at first were accepted. Initial data falsely suggested that the infection fatality rate was up to 2 to 3%, that over 80% of the population would become infected, and modeling suggested that lockdowns would be necessary. But emerging data has now shown that the effective infection rate is only 0.23%, and that the median infection fatality rate in people under the age of 70 years old is 0.05%, and that the high risk group is older people, especially those who have several diseases in place, comorbidities. In addition, it is likely that in most situations, only about 20 to 40% of the population would be infected before ongoing transmission becomes limited. So it's the so-called herd immunity again. Now that we have emerging data, we have so much collateral damage tied to these lockdowns. This can be predicted to adversely affect many millions of people globally. Here's some of the effects, you guys. Food insecurity. Think about how many people were kind of on the borderline of being able to afford food anyway. And we don't think a lot about that in America, but think about it. Like around the world, there are some very poverty-stricken areas that even a little bit of disturbance in their ecosystem of how they make money and how things work is going to have a profound impact on their food security. So there's lots of food insecurity. Upwards of 82 to 132 million more people will have food insecurity, not knowing where they're going to get their next meal. Severe poverty, 70 million more people. I think that will grow as this continues on.